Hi BookTube, my name is Juan. I am just one reader, and as you can probably tell by the background, I am here to discuss His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, which is my favorite trilogy. And the reason why I wanted to make this video right now is because I just reread the trilogy for, oh gosh, it must be like the 6th or 7th time. And I really think that this was now the right time to finally make a review, not just of each book individually, which I have done in the past, but actually make a video talking about the whole thing, the trilogy as a whole. So I am holding up my beautiful Everyman's Library edition of His Dark Materials, which is the complete trilogy in one regal, scholarly looking volume. But you can see that I have collected different editions of the book, so you can see my love for them. By the way, this video is going to be completely spoiler-free, so if you haven't read any of the books, if you have never seen any of the adaptations, if you know nothing about His Dark Materials, all the better, because this video might actually encourage you to pick the first book up. So I'm gonna show you the original copies that I first read way back in the day when I first fell in love with His Dark Materials. I must have been, oh gosh, what, like 11 years old, maybe 12? And these are my original copies. These are in Spanish. The first one is very, very creepy, but I mean, the cover is kind of creepy, but I just really love the artwork. This is the second one. And the third one must be my favorite because I remember being a very young boy and looking at the cover, this character's faces and the expressions of emptiness, very vacant expressions. I found them really interesting. So you can see that I fell in love with His Dark Materials and Philip Pullman's wonderful writing since I was a very young boy. Actually, His Dark Materials was not the first thing that I read that was written by Philip Pullman. He's an author that has written many different things, including adult novels, YA fiction, and some middle grade books as well. And I had already read some of his stuff before His Dark Materials, but it wasn't until I read this trilogy that I felt like Philip Pullman was doing something else, and he became, he solidified himself as one of the writers who has really informed my thinking in general. So, the purpose of this video is for me to tell you what my thoughts are regarding the trilogy as a whole, as one entity. I have made separate book reviews for each installment in the trilogy, so if you want to have more information about each one, you can go and check those videos out. But let me show you the copies that I recently read in this last reading of the series that I did just this past year. The first book is Northern Lights. You can see it right here. It has also been titled The Golden Compass in certain places in America. Then we have book 2, The Subtle Knife, which is my favorite, and I'm going to tell you why. And then the final one is The Amber Spyglass. The Amber Spyglass was actually the first ever book to win the very prestigious Whitbread Award. I think it was called the Whitbread Award, but now it's called something else. I think it's the Costa Prize. And this was the first book to win the award that was a middle grade or marketed as a middle grade book. So you can see that it's a big deal. And the whole series is a very big deal. It's been very popular since its publication. It's been very controversial and very fascinating. It's been a cause of discussion and controversy. It is my favorite trilogy, and it always has been a very important part of my reading history, but for very different reasons. And I think that is part of why I really love these books, because what I mean is that every single time that I have read this trilogy, it has always given me something different. It's always been able to open up in a different way and show me different sides of the prism that is the story, and the whole idea of historic materials is very multi-layered, and it has always surprised me, and it's always given me something different to think about. So I remember the first time that I ever read historic materials, I was very, very young, and I was very captivated by the ingenious world building, the curious characters, the wonderful system of magic. It's not really magic, but it's a complicated system of how things work in this world, in this literary universe, that I found completely unique. I really liked the tone of the books, how these were books that never felt condescending, that never felt childlike, even though they are, in a way, written for children or younger audiences. But they never felt patronizing or condescending or like they wanted to teach you what what other books were trying to teach you. And then as I've grown older, I have seen different layers and different sides of this trilogy. And now that I am an older, more experienced, and hopefully more mature reader, now that I have a different set of experiences, and now that I have a different view of the world, and now that I have a job as a psychoanalyst, and having all this new baggage that I have nowadays, I've been able to see and re-experience this trilogy and still find it fascinating and wonderful. So I want to tell you some of the reasons why I think this trilogy is so great. I'm going to tell you the things that I really like about this series, and I'm also going to be a little bit critical about the things that I found a little heavy-handed or just not to my complete liking. But starting with the positives. Okay, so I feel like Historic Materials is very, very strong as a philosophical statement. It even feels a little bit, or quite a bit, especially towards the ending. No spoilers, but I just want to make this point very clearly. It feels like some kind of philosophical manifesto. It feels like the author has a very strong idea, a thesis that he wants to convey. And he does it very, very directly and very precisely, especially in book 3, The Amber Spyglass, which really is the book in which the author really brings everything to fruition and to a very satisfying conclusion. So I feel like as a philosophical piece of as a philosophical statement, Historic Materials is very strong. It is very coherent and cohesive. It is thematically very, very strong, and the themes that it brings to the table are themes that children and readers of all ages, but children in particular, really have to start to think about from a very young age, I believe. So these are books that deal with very heavy subjects like what is truth, what is consciousness, what is freedom, what is oppression, what is faith, what is the relevance of science and knowledge, and how our systems that we have created as humankind promote certain ideas or certain ways of either freeing people's thinking or becoming rigid, and they don't allow for free thinking. So they are thematically very strong and I think very relevant, and they are essential essential books for children, in my opinion. I am always finding myself recommending these books to children and teenagers and also their parents and their teachers because they really provide for good critical thinking. However, that's just the sort of more literary, philosophical, intellectual part of it. The other side, the other part of why historic materials is so great is because they are just really fun and really great novels. They are epic fantasy mysteries. They are filled with secrets and adventures and quests. The characters are so rich. The characters, in particular, I think, are one of the most important things that you can find in this kind of genre of literature in middle grade or YA fiction, because they are unique characters with a lot of layers. They are very complex, utterly flawed and complicated, and you develop a very strong attachment to them. It struck me as something very, very impressive and fascinating how now, even still now, to this day, when I was reading book 3, I was very, very moved. I wanted to cry. I felt sad and hopeful, and I did not want to part with these characters. I did not want to say goodbye, and I felt like a small child again. So these books are very moving, and the characters are very interesting, and they are a very important reason of why these books are so successful and so appealing and so attractive to readers of all ages. We have children characters, we have adult characters, we have a really huge cast of characters and creatures that is a very diverse ensemble. We have angels, witches, creatures, animals, demons, and by demons, I mean the demons that Philip Pullman has come up with, which are this incredible invention of a part of your soul or yourself that is outside of your physical body. And so it's like having an extension of yourself. And it's a very interesting relationship right there. Another really great thing that I think makes historic materials such a wonderful read is the settings, the use of setting and place, the sense of place that Philip Pullman is always coming up with these incredible universes and these worlds and buildings and just wonderful settings that you can really feel are both real but also surreal, and it's just great. I love it when a writer is able to put a picture of something in my mind that something that I can't quite imagine, but just the slightest semblance of that is very fascinating. Another thing that I think is really important to me, and something that struck me very much this last time that I read these books now as an adult, is how these books are very much about discovery and about the sense of wonder, of experiencing the world and the mysteries of life, the mysteries of the world. These are books that are always asking questions. You could even say that they are about the need to ask questions, and they are very much about how children should be allowed to make all the questions that they want to make, and how it's very important to provide them with more questions and not just spoon feed them ridiculous answers that will stop their thinking. So I really enjoy how the three books throughout the entire trilogy, Philip Pullman is always showing you and describing, depicting the sense of awe that you feel when you discover something, when you are curious, when you are inquisitive about something. These are books that always keep you sort of fascinated. And I mean fascinated because to me, fascination is sort of a mystery, but also a thrall, a rush. It feels like an adventure, but it's also not understanding something fully. So that's really the most important thing that I want to say regarding the positives. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the negatives that I found, the things that I was a little bit more critical of when I read these books now as an adult. And I mainly have two complaints. My first complaint is that, and I think this is something that people are always complaining about when they are criticizing this trilogy, is that they can be very heavy-handed, especially book 3. You know, book 1 and book 2 are more about the adventures and the characters and their quests and the worlds that they start to travel through. But then book 3 is very, very heavy-handed regarding religion and faith and the church and all of these anti-religious, anti-church, anti-institutionalized religion ideas that Philip Pullman is trying to convey. I have to say that I am an atheist or agnostic. I am not religious. I am actually anti-religion myself. And even though I agree with the message that is that Philip Pullman is conveying here, I do believe that sometimes it felt a little heavy-handed and a little bit too on the nose, especially book 3. There are some paragraphs in there that could not be more explicit. So that is one criticism that I have, because it, to some degree, it felt like what he was trying to say was more important, was taking from the story itself, and I didn't really like that, but it's okay, I can forgive that. And then my other criticism is regarding the action sequences. There are some action sequences, not all of them, but there are some of them in book 3 especially that I felt, and also in book 1, that felt rather slow and a little difficult to follow. And so the rhythm, the pacing of certain action sequences was a little bit off to me. That's a very personal thing. And that happened to me in book 1 and in book 3. I have to tell you, my favorite book in the trilogy is book number 2, which is very strange because usually in a trilogy, the book in the middle is the one that tends to suffer from the sandwich effect. It's usually the book where things from the previous installment are developed and things from the climax are starting to develop as well. However, The Subtle Knife was my favorite because it's such a great novel. I think it's the best novel of the 3 as a novel, as a standalone. I think it's the best one. I think it has amazing characters. We are presented with many characters. Characters from book 1 have very interesting arcs. We also get to see a lot of world building and beautiful writing from Philip Pullman. It's a very interesting, fast-paced adventure, thriller with a lot of mystery in it, and I think it's just great writing. My second favorite has to be book 3, even though it has many flaws in how heavy-handed it is. It is my favorite one because it is a perfect conclusion. Um, and this is something that I really want to emphasize in my video. I think his Dark Materials has a lot of flaws as a trilogy, but one thing that I find undeniable is the fact that it really sticks the landing. I really cannot think of a trilogy or a series for that matter that that is so satisfying towards the end. It is satisfying in every single way. It is bittersweet. It is harrowing. It is sad. It is hopeful. It is right. It is not a happy ending. It's not a sad ending either. It's just the right ending. It's the ending that it really should have. And I really like how brave Philip Pullman was with that ending. Before I wrap this up, I want to compare and contrast his Dark Materials with some other book series or trilogies that are slightly similar or around the same ballpark, the same category, because I think that is an interesting exercise. So starting out with Harry Potter, the very obvious, one of the very obvious contenders, I think Harry Potter is a lot more funny. I think Harry Potter is hilarious and very light and very cozy. And his Dark Materials, as wonderful as it is, it never feels funny. It never feels truly, truly light-hearted. It never feels quite as cozy and delightful as Harry Potter certainly does. Throughout the entire series, Harry Potter feels like coming home and inhabiting the world of Hogwarts. It's a very cozy kind of world building, whereas his Dark Materials has a very different kind of world and a very different tonal quality. And the world building is also very interesting, but very different. So in a way, I think Harry Potter is much more rereadable because of the cozy, delightful, joyous, warm factor that it gives you as a reader. However, I do have to give his Dark Materials a very strong point against Harry Potter because Harry Potter's ending is pretty bad. The final book in Harry Potter was more or less to my liking. I think the climax was very good, but then we have the conclusion and the way that everything wraps up it's just very lousily done. I think J.K. Rowling did a pretty bad job at really bringing the entire series to a conclusion and to a slow conclusion. I think she didn't do that. She just gave us an epilogue that was very unnecessary. But anyway, this video is not about Harry Potter. However, his Dark Materials is pretty much the opposite. His Dark Materials is a great example in how to end a series. We have battle sequences, action sequences, we have a very huge epic climax, and then we still have about 100 pages worth of conclusion and putting everything back in its place and setting everything down so that when you reach the final pages, you are ready for the book to be over, and it's just very, very well done. Harry Potter, not so much. Now, The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is very similar to his Dark Materials in that they both have a similar kind of structure. They are 3 books, and the last book is very, very heavy with adventure and climax and really cool epic sequences. And then we have a very satisfying, slow conclusion, just like I mentioned before. And regarding the differences, I would say that, to me, The Lord of the Rings really excels, or I really like The Lord of the Rings because it feels like history. It feels like you are reading a historical treaty of some kind. It feels like you are reading anthropology, some kind of weird document about Middle Earth, like a real civilization. It feels very historical, very real, and you can see that Tolkien had a complete command of his universe. So it feels very much like an anthropological text. And his Dark Materials feels more like a rollicking adventure. So I would say that people who enjoy his Dark Materials will probably enjoy The Lord of the Rings and vice versa, even though these are more about the action. These are more about the people and the world. And finally, we have to talk about the Chronicles of Narnia because rumor has it that his Dark Materials was written as a response or a counterpoint to the Chronicles of Narnia because, as you probably are aware of, the Narnia books are very much about Christianity and the story of Christ and all of that. Which is funny because I remember when I was a boy reading the Chronicles of Narnia, I never really thought of that. It wasn't until I grew up that I started to see all the religious messages and allegories, and I didn't like finding that out or coming to that realization. But nevertheless, both of these books, a series of books, are very heavy-handed. They are very allegorical and very much about the philosophical ideas and viewpoints of their author. I do think that they are very strong in terms of storytelling. The Chronicles of Narnia are incredible stories that are addictive and beautifully written and rich, and the world building is wonderful. They are immersive, and you love the characters, and everything is great. And then they have a complete new meaning when you start to think of the religious undertones or overtones. And the same thing happens with his Dark Materials. You can read them as stories, as adventures, as many children have done. But then when you see the philosophical ideas and the philosophical layer of things, they become completely different and charged with more significance. The biggest difference, of course, is that, well, many things. I think the Chronicles of Narnia, as wonderful and cozy and delightful as they are, and Jesus knows I love them, Jesus. I think they are a little bit condescending and a little bit patronizing, especially book 7. It's a very problematic ending. And his Dark Materials is not. His Dark Materials is very much about teaching children the truth and how cruel and beautiful the world can be, full of mysteries and full of questions that will never be answered. And I think that is a wonderful gift. Finally, I want to give you a recommendation in case you have read the trilogy. In case you have read his Dark Materials and you are a fan, I want to give you a recommendation because I think you will really love the Bartimaeus Trilogy. The Bartimaeus Trilogy by Jonathan Stroud is exactly what you have been looking for if you enjoy his Dark Materials and if you enjoy good old Harry Potter. I think if there's a Venn diagram with Harry Potter and his Dark Materials on either side of the bubbles of the diagram, this would be right in the middle. This has it all. It is witty, it is sarcastic and dark, it's magical, it is a drama, it is an adventure, it has witches and wizards, but they are not what you are expecting. They are very different, and the magic system is really twisted and great. They are great adventure stories and mysteries. They are hilarious, like really, really funny. And then they are also very illuminating and critical of many things, especially politics. So they are not condescending. So that is a great trilogy to explore if you enjoy this kind of thing. So that's it. That's my video, my recommendation video for historic materials. And before I go, I want to share with you some footage that I took when I went to Oxford last year. I had the opportunity to visit Oxford in England. And if you have read historic materials, you'll know that Oxford is a very important setting, especially in book 1 and in book 3. Actually, book 3 ends at a very important place in Oxford, the Botanical Garden. And so when I went to Oxford last year, I was able to go to that Botanical Garden, and I followed the instructions that Philip Pullman describes here at the end of that final chapter. And I visited the wooden bench, the very famous Will and Lyra bench. You know what I'm talking about if you have read the book. And I was able to be there, to sit in that bench and take some video and some pictures of that. So I want to share some of that with you and show you some of the pictures that I took from that trip to Oxford. I also saw in a bookshop called Blackwell's, which is great. They had a beautiful display of Philip Pullman books, which I thought was just lovely, that the local bookshop honors the local author so greatly and so highly and so lovingly. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy. I hope you love historic materials as much as I have. And let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.
No, but there was a crow actually involved. I think this is a cat. They just sculpted a native cat. Its face is not very. It's cat. The other one.
It's like a mix cat.
It's got a funny body.
Mouse.